All right, everybody. We have a live feed in the Tex McIver courtroom. The lead Atlanta police officer, Detective, is taking the stand right now. This should be very interesting. The state is not resting their case. They are still building it up. Let's listen in live to what this detective has to say about the case.
Where I grew up to about 5 years, decided to make a career move to a larger city to see a few more things in the line of police work. So put out a couple applications. Atlanta Police Department hired me in January of 2005, so I made the trip to Atlanta.
Okay. And when you first got hired by the Atlanta Police Department, how were you assigned within the department?
I was assigned to the Field Operations Division, which is our uniform patrol division. I was assigned to the Zone 5 precinct, which was out at the CNN Center in downtown. For some years, 3 or 4 years, I worked on the street.
Okay. And can you tell the jury a little bit about your duties and responsibilities there in the homicide department?
As a homicide detective, we are responsible to respond to all homicides within the city of Atlanta. We respond to suspicious deaths.
Let me stop for 1 second. We may need to lose the mic if it gives feedback. Maybe we can turn it down a little bit or move something.
No, our files are all electronic. We upload everything to an electronic database. We keep the original documentation if we need it at the request of the DA's office.
Okay. And this blue binder represents what with respect to the homicide file?
This is not the actual file. I just took this off the file folder. The original file, about that big, with all the documents we've got. I didn't want to tote that over, so this is just another folder with a file, with a report.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, when did you become involved in this case, and as a result of being contacted, what did you do?
I believe it was September 26, 2016, about 1:20 in the morning. It was a Sunday. It was my day off. I think I was in bed. Got a phone call, which is typical. I don't know how many times that's happened to me. So Detective Griffin from our homicide unit, who works the evening watch, calls and explained that there was a shooting that involved a couple of people in a vehicle, and unfortunately there was somebody that was deceased.
Okay. So what did you do?
Got ready. Drove into the city. I live north of the city, so it takes me about 45 minutes to an hour by the time I get a phone call to get here. Detective Griffin had informed me that one of the involved parties was already at our headquarters downtown, and then the other involved party, from the information he had, was no longer at the hospital. And the vehicle that was involved was in the hospital in the parking deck, where a uniformed officer was standing by until we decided what we wanted to do with it. So I made the decision to come to headquarters to interview the witness that was there at the time.
And who's that witness?
Patricia Carter. She goes by Danny Joe.
Okay. And can you tell the jury what time did you get to the homicide office to actually get an opportunity to speak with Danny Joe Carter?
I think I got there around 2:15, 2:20 in the morning. Gathered a few things and started the interview.
Okay. That was the first thing you did with respect to the case. You interviewed Danny Joe Carter?
Yeah, I mean, I had received some information from Detective Griffin. I printed out a couple of pictures just so I'd have a reference with her. We're all talking about the same people.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, did you document the interview with Ms. Carter in any way?
Yes, I did.
And how did you do that?
It was video and audio recorded.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how long did the interview with her last?
My interview was about maybe just under an hour. I think it was around 53 minutes to be exact, but right under an hour.
Okay. And when you were interviewing her, did you threaten her?
No, I did not.
Okay. Did you promise her anything?
No.
Did you put any words in her mouth?
No.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors where did the interview take place?
Public safety headquarters. The third floor is the major crimes unit. We have 4 or 5 separate interview rooms, and then we have 3 or 4 interview rooms where people are in custody that we talk to just for security purposes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, in the course of your training during your law enforcement career, have you had classes with respect to interviewing witnesses?
Yes, I have.
And can you explain that to the jury?
When I first came on, in the course of my slow climb through the department, I took a couple of interview classes. I took one down in the Institute of Police Technology and Management, I believe, was the school down in Jacksonville.
Welcome back, everybody. I don't want to waste any time. We're here in the Claude Tex McIver courtroom. That is Darren Smith, the lead detective in this case about a prominent attorney who's on trial for shooting and killing his wife. Let's listen in live.
For what purpose we're going back through what was said, whether, I guess under the 6th series, whether, do you want me to?
No, I understand your question. Why it's being revisited, I think, relates to the 6th series.
Yes.
And if there is a disagreement as to whether this is a prior consistent or prior inconsistent or none of the above, then we can talk about it. I think where we are right now is an area where both could apply. So that's why I assumed you were allowing some leeway here. But if we need to parse it out statement by statement, I'm happy doing that. There are clearly some areas where it's appropriate, others. My suggestion is don't rehash the entire thing, because there were plenty of aspects of what was said that were not challenged. And so then that would not be an appropriate approach here.
And I hope the court and the counsel can see that's not what I'm doing. I'm really very targeted.
You just started, and so I don't know where you're going. But I understand right now, I don't think you've run afoul of a...
And that's why I didn't object to the first question.
Yeah.
I don't want to put everybody on notice that.
Same. Yeah. So we're on the same wavelength, and I will understand if there's an objection if we're straying outside that.
Thank you.
Sure, keep going.
Detective Smith, did Danny Jo Carter tell you during your interview with her the very first time that there were scary people approaching the car?
Yes, I don't recall if she used the word scary, but I think there was people she was concerned about.
Okay. That's what she told you?
Yes, so she was, they were concerned about people coming up to the car. She was, anyways.
During your interview with Danny Jo Carter, did she discuss any details with you about what happened at the hospital once they arrived?
Yes, she did.
And can you tell the jury, did she tell you during this interview any information about any conversations she would have had with the defendant?
Yes, she did.
And can you tell the jury, what did she tell you?
I don't think there was, from what she told me, there didn't appear to be much of a conversation between the two of them at the hospital. I think there was some discussion about her going back out to the vehicle to get some cell phones and some items that may be necessary for whatever they need at the hospital.
Okay. Did she tell you whether or not the defendant said for her to tell the police that she was not inside of the SUV when the shot was fired?
That conversation did not come up.
She never told you that?
No.
And in your interview with her, did she tell you who was the first person to arrive at the hospital after they brought Diane to Emory?
Yes.
And what did she tell you?
Stephen Maples.
Now, are you familiar with Mr. Maples yourself?
Yes, I am.
And who do you know him to be?
He was an attorney. I think it was Detective Griffin, or I believe handed me his card as I got to the office. So,
And what kind of attorney is he?
a criminal defense attorney.
And did you document the contact information that was on the business card you received in your report?
I did. I wrote it on a piece of paper just to have a reference. The card's still in my office with my other stack of cards over the years.
Here's a switch, Judge. It's not hard. may have borrowed one of your markers.
I don't know what I can say.
Are they in fact his, or did he repurpose yours?
I don't know what I have to do.
Okay, all right. Well, I got it, Mr. Moore.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I gave mine back to you. I gave mine.
Do you have documented in your file the number for Steve Maples?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Would you give them, please?
I went through the report on that one.
This would be the advertised work phone number that he's giving you, or?
I'll use the last 4 digits.
Great.
Thank you, Judge.
I think Mr. Maples will thank you too.
Which I probably still have it on my phone, to be honest with you. Last
Hold on. Yeah, the last 4, right.
Yes, 9314.
And can you tell the jury, did you try to contact him?
Yes, I did.
And when did you try to contact him?
4:38 in the morning.
And what happened? What did you do first of all, and then tell us what happened?
Obviously, I left a message for him. I wanted to talk to Mr. McIver sooner than later.
Okay. And you made that phone call at 4:38 a.m.?
Yes, I did.
Okay. To the number that's listed there on the board?
Yes.
All right, we'll keep going. Someone's phone needs to be put in the silent mode.
Okay. At the time that you called Mr. Maples, did you know whether or not they were still at the hospital?
No, I did not.
Where did you understand the vehicle was at that time?
And the parking garage at the hospital.
Can you tell the jury, after your interview with Danny Joe Carter, what did you do?
I drove over to the hospital. Detective Klein, he's another detective within our unit, graciously volunteered to get a search warrant at the early hours of the morning for us to recover the vehicle and take possession of it and take it back to one of our facilities.
Okay. And do you know what time you got the warrant?
Sorry.
What time did you get the warrant?
I think it was signed at around 4:42 in the morning. I got to the parking deck around 5 a.m.
Okay. You actually traveled to Emory University Hospital?
I did.
Okay. And when you got to the hospital, what area of the hospital did you go to first?
The parking deck to see the vehicle.
Okay. And when you got to the parking deck, what did you see?
There was several vehicles in the parking deck. A white Ford Expedition was backed into one of the parking spots. It might have been level 2 or 3 as you come in off the street level on the backside of, obviously, Emory University campus is huge. So it wasn't one of those decks.
Okay. Can you tell the jury when you arrived there at the vehicle, was there a uniformed police officer there securing the vehicle?
Yes, I believe Officer Anderson, uniformed police, marked patrol car.
Okay. Did you learn during the course of the investigation how the vehicle got to that parking deck?
Yes, I believe it was the valet service, because based on the information that Ms. Carter gave us, the valet parked the vehicle, and that's where it was.
Now, when you got there at the vehicle, did you search it at that time?
No, it did not.
And why not?
Waiter's search warrant to seize the vehicle. I would need a separate search warrant to go inside to process the vehicle. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, it's dark. I'd rather have a controlled environment at our facility, so we just took possession of the vehicle.
And how did you take possession of it?
Unfortunately, I had to get in the driver's seat and drive it out. The clearance wasn't low enough for the wrecker service we use. So I just got in the driver's seat, pulled it off just enough so the wrecker could get a hold of it.
Okay. And when you, where did you get the key from?
Valet service.
And when you got into the vehicle, did you have to adjust the seat in any way?
I don't recall if I did or not. I may have left it as is.
Okay. And after you drove the vehicle out of the parking deck, how was it transported?
One of our local wrecker, we have contracted wrecker services. They hooked onto the vehicle. We took it over to we have a separate annex within the police department over off 3493 Donnelly Hollowell Parkway, which is west of 285 on the city limits with Cobb County. We have a secure facility back there where we put all our vehicles involved in any type of homicide or investigation that we're working that is locked, and only the homicide people have access to it. And I followed the vehicle. Yes, I was right behind it the way.
You followed it all the way to the secure location?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So did you ever, while you were there on the Emory University campus, did you ever go into the emergency room?
No, I did not.
Okay. At any time while you were at Emory, did you ever see either the defendant or Attorney Maples?
No, I was under the impression from Detective Griffin that they had already left the hospital.
Now, when you got back to the secured location for the vehicle, what did you do after that?
Locked it up, returned back to headquarters, tried to get some information together as part of the initial case file, what we're looking at. And by then, some of the other detectives from the Day Watch unit came in, so we started discussing the case and go forward.
Welcome back, everybody. That's Darren Smith, the lead detective in the Claude Tex McIver case, a husband who is on trial for shooting and killing his wife. Let's listen in right now.
I think you made the statement that, at some point I think I need to come talk to you. I think we had scheduled up a time for the following day. I told him I was there 7 in the morning, 8, 9, or 10, whenever he wanted to come in. He indicated he would call me the next day to set up a time to come in.
Now, did you ask him any questions at that time about what occurred on the inside of the SUV?
No, I don't like to have those conversations over a phone. I'd rather have them in person.
Okay. So, can you tell the jury what, if anything, you did with respect to the investigation after 4:37 telephone conversation with the defendant?
Like I said, I went about my evening, headed back into work the next day. I usually arrive to work around 7 o'clock in the morning. So I just started going through databases to see if we had any other involvements with either parties, and if there was anything in there that would help with the investigation, police reports, prior incidences. But I think the only thing I found was a theft from an auto report years ago.
Okay. So when you said you were checking databases for incidents between the parties, what do you mean?
A lot of our cases we work, we obviously want to get a background on the people involved with it. Have they ever been arrested before? Were they involved in any other crimes? Particularly in this case, being the dynamics of it, husband-wife, I was looking to see if there were any prior domestic police reports filed with the city of Atlanta that we may have investigated. Just any information that would help me out.
Okay. And the bottom line is you did not find anything?
Not relevant to this case.
Okay. But you did find a theft report?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jurors the theft report involved what?
I believe it was a car.
Tell us the contents of the report as for subject matter with respect to the report.
But the only way that you know the subject matter would be to have read the report.
So it seems like hearsay, and I'm not sure how relevant it is. Maybe after cross-examination it becomes relevant, but it had nothing to do with any type of conflict between Ms. McIver and Mr. McIver.
That's correct. And I'm not trying to cast that.
Right, I didn't think you were.
Yeah.
So let's move to a different area.
Okay. After checking databases, can you tell the jury, did you get an opportunity to make an appointment to interview the defendant?
Not that early in the morning, no.
Okay, so what did you do?
I typed up a search warrant for the expedition that was involved with the incident.
And the search warrant was to do what?
To search the vehicle and collect, the warrant was pretty specific, to collect any evidence that's related to a gunshot, ballistic evidence, firearms, anything like that.
Okay. Did the search warrant, and just so the jurors understand, when you apply for a search warrant, are you free to apply to search for anything that you believe is relevant to the investigation?
As long as you can justify it in your affidavit. You just can't, if you have a stabbing case, you can't look for guns. Because how is that? It's not related to
I'm
stabbing.
sorry, if you have a what?
If you have like a stabbing case, somebody was stabbed, you can't put in your search warrant, you want to look for a gun, unless you can somehow determine that that was part of the crime that was investigated. So we just put in what we believe is relevant with our warrant. We just can't go on a wild goose chase. We got to put what we believe we're looking for. If we find something else, we can go apply for a second warrant for other stuff that we think is involved or illegal.
Okay. And at that time that you applied for that warrant, did you have any information with respect to whether or not alcohol would have been a subject area for the investigation?
Not at that time.
Okay. And so you didn't put that in your warrant?
No, we did not.
So after applying for the warrant, did you get the authority to search the vehicle?
Yes, I did.
And did you search the vehicle?
I did.
And can you tell the jury what time was that?
Around 10:55 in the morning on the 27th.
Okay. So now we're on the next case, 27.
That's correct.
Okay. And can you tell the jury how was the vehicle searched?
I like to be involved with all my searches on vehicles. I think a couple of our crime scene techs were present, kind of explained what we wanted to go through, photographs, and then I believe I started at the rear of the vehicle, the rear door, and kind of worked my way forward. Obviously, it was obvious to me when the shooting incident occurred, so I kind of focused in on that general area on the passenger side, front and rear.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, did you have the assistance of anyone to search the vehicle?
Like I said, crime scene tech, Tragot was there. I don't remember the other crime scene tech. They were more of a, this is what I'd like to have you do type of thing, and that had my direction.
Okay. And so can you tell the jury, what were your observations once you started searching the vehicle?
Again, the vehicle, it was, I wouldn't say a disarray, but things were kind of out of order. There was, but I did notice in the rear passenger seat, the seat was slightly reclined to the rear, towards the back of the vehicle. There was an obvious, what we call a defect, but it was consistent with what would be a bullet hole in the back of the front driver's side seat. There was a brown plastic bag that, again, had the butt of the gun, a gun sticking out of it that appeared to be, I wouldn't say pushed under, but it appeared to be under like a purse or something. And then moved to the front of the vehicle. There was the corresponding bullet hole on the front of the vehicle, big black hat sitting on the front seat. So obviously we want to photograph anything before we even touch it, just to get it as, and this is how it was. So we photographed everything, and then, we would decide how much evidence we wanted to collect. We'd number all the items so that I can remember down the road what each piece of evidence indicated. So at that point, we went through it, and I think we started with the gun and worked our way forward to the front of the vehicle.
Okay. And did you document the this vehicle in any way?
Yes, I did.
Okay. How did you document it?
Two ways. Obviously photographs, and then I drew a diagram just to give me a better idea looking at it.
Okay. I'm showing you an exhibit. This is State's Exhibit 494. Can you tell the jurors, do you recognize and can you identify 494?
Yes, this is my report of the crime scene diagram of the vehicle.
Okay. You actually prepared that yourself?
Yes, I did.
And that diagram indicates what?
The items that we collected for evidence, we collected 5 items of evidence during the search. It also gives a rough idea of where they were in the vehicle from a bird's eye view.
Okay. Can you say to the jurors whether or not that diagram has been altered or any of the contents that you created been deleted or changed in any way?
No, they have not.
Okay. I will tender State's Exhibit 494, judging the evidence.
494 is, so 494 testifiers from, unless that got pulled out, Mr. Weitzel from yesterday.
Okay.
494. 496 is open. Okay.
Gotcha.
Thank you. I'm amending, Judge, the exhibit to 496 and seek to tender it into evidence.
Okay. No objection to the renumbered 496? No. Admitted.
And I think you told the jurors there were 5 items that were collected.
Yes.
And are they delineated here on this exhibit 496?
Yes, they are.
And can you just tell the jurors what are the 5 things that you delineated on your diagram?
Item number 1 was a Smith & Wesson .38 caliber revolver. It was a model 638. Second marker was a defect in the back of the front passenger seat. Marker number 3 was the corresponding defect in the front passenger seat. Number 5 was a pristine bullet we actually located in the seat, front passenger seat. And then number 5 was a leather holster that we recovered out of the center console of the vehicle.
And what is that right there?
That is a sketch that I did just to give me a better idea to see all the pieces of evidence at one time.
Let me show you an exhibit. It states 387. Now, tell the jurors whether you recognize and can identify what you were taking to the 387.
Yes, I can.
And what is it?
This is the evidence bag that the marker number 5, the leather holster, was placed in by a crime scene tech tracker.
Okay. And you actually was there to direct the processing and the collection of that holster?
Yes, I was.
Okay. What is that exhibit number again?
387.
387, Judge. I pretend to 387 in the evidence.
Any objection? The holster is in.
Could you open the bag, please, Detective Smith? Give me some scissors.
Sure. You got some gloves, too?
Not me.
Fancy gloves.
And once you get it open, I'd like for you to remove the contents and show the jurors. And with, of course, permission, if we just come down, I see some jurors leaning forward and squinting. Just, if you start back in the back so the jurors can see.
Want to come further? Okay.
Okay. And if you would just repackage it. This is State's Exhibit number 369. Can you take a look at it and tell the jurors that you recognize and identify it?
This is the box the gun was placed in. I believe it was marker number 1.
And you can open it up and take a look on the inside. And can you tell the jurors that you recognize and can you identify that?
Yes, that was the gun that we recovered out of the vehicle.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors how long did the processing of the vehicle take?
I think I completed it around 12:45.
Okay.
About an hour and 45 minutes.
Hold on one second.
The keys that are locked.
Can Deputy Kane have the key back? Were you needing,
Just the key.
yeah. Yesterday, we had allowed at least one witness, if not more, to remove that. But those are some keen eyes. Seen that from over there.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
It's secured now, isn't it, Deputy?
Yes.
All right. All right.
Thank you, Deputy King.
Total processing of the vehicle lasted about how long?
I lived an hour and 45 minutes.
Okay. Now, the warrant allowed you to search for ballistic evidence, is that right?
That's correct.
At that time, can you tell the jurors, did you make any requests of any of the crime scene techs to process the vehicle for the presence or the absence of gunshot residue or powder?
No, I didn't think that was necessary with this particular case. In my experience, if a gun is fired in the vehicle, the entire vehicle will probably test positive for some type of gunshot residue.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors, did you make any requests to have the seat removed at that time and sent to the GBI for testing to determine a muzzle target distance determination?
Again, I did not do that. I believe, based on the evidence that I could see in front of me, it wasn't necessary because, based on my experience, it did not appear to be a close range or a contact type shot to the seat. So other than that, the gun would have been away from the seat. So with the short distance between the two seats, I didn't believe it was necessary to try to figure out that distance based on my experience, because it would just give a range, possibly up to 2 feet, and it wasn't any more than barely 2 feet, I believe, distance between the two seats anyways.
You described well, strike that. You said that you found a pristine bullet.
Yes.
What does that mean?
To me, that this particular bullet, it was a full metal jacket, which is what we target practice and qualify with and get issued to the department for targeting qualifications. What I mean pristine is it didn't appear to have any, the bullet seemed to be intact. It hadn't mushroomed or shredded apart like a full jacketed hollow point would, which is our duty ammo. It was solid, and you could actually see tool markings on the bullet itself to the visible eye.
And when you were processing the vehicle, did you look at the vehicle interior with your own 2 eyes?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury on the dashboard or the ceiling or the floorboard anywhere, the doors, did you see anything that appeared to be like a ricochet mark or anything?
No, I did not.
Now, can you tell the jury, when you looked at the hole in the back of the seat, did you find a corresponding hole to the front of the seat?
Yes, I did.
And during the processing of the vehicle at this time, can you tell the jury was a trajectory rod inserted through those, through the seat?
Yes, it was.
And did it appear to go straight through the seat?
Straight through, yes. I think I had a slight deviation from down to up.
When you recovered the gun and when you recovered the gun, what did you do?
Actually, I obviously had my gloves on. I picked the weapon up. I'm familiar with this gun. I actually have one. My model is just one model off, so I am vastly familiar with this weapon and how it works. First thing I did was open the cylinder up, which basically disables the gun to fire. And then I just looked as a cylinder, round cylinder, it can hold up to 5 rounds, cartridges, and one of them appeared to have been fired.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, when you removed the cylinder from the gun, did you manipulate it, turn it, spin it in any way?
I tried to just open it up as is.
And when you opened it up as is, did you photograph it in that condition?
Yes, I did.
Now, can you tell the jury, did you do anything to make the gun safe such that it could be transported away from the vehicle and anywhere else?
I took all the bullets out of the cylinder. And then I may have left the cylinder partially open, or it may have been closed when we put it in the box, but there were no bullets in the cylinder. The gun could not have fired unless there were bullets added to it.
Okay.
Your voice is dropping.
I'm sorry.
Can you get your answer, please?
The bullets were taken out of the cylinder, placed in the gun box, and the gun was safe.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, what did you do with the gun, the bullet, the cartridges that you removed from the cylinder, and the pristine bullet that you found in the front seat? What did you do with those things?
Those were checked in to our property unit as evidence.
And then, did you cause them to be sent to the Georgia Bureau of Investigations Crime Lab?
Yes.
When did you do that?
Shortly afterwards, I think it was requested that they get there sooner than later.
Do you know a date?
Not off the top of my head. I mean, it was within that week, I believe. I don't think it was much of a time frame.
Okay. Would you, do you have that information in the report? Would it help to refresh your recollection?
I don't have it in my report. I think there might have been a sheet when we turned it in.
Okay. Can you tell the jury at that time, did you look inside of the vehicle to see whether or not there was the presence of any alcohol or wine?
I just happened to notice a bottle of wine in the rear, I guess, fold of the front passenger seat. There's just a bottle of wine there. Again, it was beyond my scope of the search warrant, so I didn't seize it, but I did look at it, and I don't think, there didn't appear to be much missing. I believe the cap was, it appeared to have been opened at some point.
Okay. Did you actually pick it up and shake it or anything to determine how much was left in it?
I did not.
And did you check any other containers inside the vehicle to see if they would contain any wine or alcohol?
Again, I did not, because it was outside the scope of my warrant.
So, can you tell the jury, we're on the 27th, it's early afternoon, what happened next?
Actually, after we got the warrant secured, I'd actually tried to call Mr. McIver one more time to see when our appointment was for the day. I didn't get an answer, so I left a message. During the processing, or just before, I think I called Stephen Maples again, tried to set up a time for a meeting, and we agreed at 1 p.m. that day, the 27th, to set up a meeting in my office at headquarters.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, did you have the opportunity to interview Mr. McIver at 1 p.m. on September 27th, as Mr. Maples had indicated?
No, actually when I got back to my vehicle after processing it, there was a voicemail from Mr. Maples saying that he would not be able to make the meeting today, or that day.
Can you tell the jury, what's the next thing that you did?
About 1 p.m. in the afternoon, when I got back to the office, I received a phone call from Patricia Carter. She wanted to provide some more information.
Okay. And can you tell the jury the information that she provided, without telling us exactly what she said to you, did it have to do with any of the details of what occurred inside of the SUV during the shooting?
No, it did not.
Okay. So, how long did that phone call last, Ms. Carter?
Maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay. And after the phone call, what did you do?
I contacted a Craig Stringer based on the information received from
I'm sorry, you contacted me.
Craig Stringer.
Okay. And was that a name that you had received?
Yes,
And from whom?
Miss Carter.
And did you get the opportunity to speak to Mr. Stringer?
Yes, I did.
And when did you talk to Mr. Stringer?
I believe that around 1:30 p.m. that afternoon.
And after you spoke to Mr. Stringer, what did you do next?
I contacted our video integration center, Atlanta Police Department. Obviously, I'm trying to backtrack cameras. We have a lot of cameras in that area. The information I had was on Piedmont Avenue, somewhere near Piedmont Park. I work that district on an extra job through this private organization, so I'm familiar with the cameras, where they may be. The VIC unit indicated that the cameras weren't available for that area at that particular time.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors what is the private organization that you work an extra job for?
It's part of the Midtown Alliance, and they have a public safety sector, which is called Midtown Blue, where they hire off-duty Atlanta police officers to give extra added patrol in the Midtown area.
Now, does Midtown Blue operate its own separate set of video cameras?
Yes, they do.
Okay. And so the VIC cameras, they are operated by whom?
The city of Atlanta. It's an integrated center. The police department has cameras that are purchased and put up as part of the police department. It's also integrated into other companies, businesses, neighborhood, where they can look at multiple cameras that may not necessarily belong to the police department.
Okay. And when you checked for any video information from those cameras, what was the result?
I believe we got the timeline. We located the vehicle we were looking for, but I believe that was a couple of days later we found that video.
Okay, I'm talking about the VIC cameras.
Oh, there was nothing in the video. They said there was no video available.
For the VIC cameras?
That's correct.
Okay. Now we got Midtown Blue cameras.
Yes.
Okay. And when you checked for the Midtown Blue cameras, what result did you get?
We located the vehicle that was involved with the shooting on the video. We first picked it up at Piedmont and 10th Street.
And can you tell the jury, are there either VIC cameras or Midtown Blue cameras at the intersection of Piedmont and 14th?
I believe there's a VIC camera there, but it points into Piedmont Park, always.
And so, based on that angle, would you be able to capture that intersection there at Piedmont and 14th?
Not at all.
Did you actually obtain the video there for Midtown Blue?
Yes, I did. I just happened to be working my job that day and decided to have them look at the cameras for us, just in case we missed something on our end.
Okay. Now, where did you learn the information about the route?
Most of that came on the interview with Miss Carter that I had with her.
What did you do next in the investigation of any significance?
I contacted Longhorns out in Conyers, talked to the manager out there. Just trying to gather information to get a time frame is important. They knew the place they were coming from was in Putnam County. The information, they stopped at Longhorn and Conyers, and then they continued their trip into Atlanta. So just trying to verify that actually happened.
Okay. And did you actually receive any documentation from Longhorn?
Yes, I believe I got a copy of the actual receipt that was paid for by Mr. Stinger that night.
Okay. And did you actually look at the receipt?
Yes, I did.
On the receipt, did you see whether or not there was any alcohol or wine that was purchased?
Yes, I believe there was a bottle of wine.
So this is still Tuesday the 27th. What did you do next?
At some point I went home that afternoon. I think I compiled some stuff, made some notes just for reference for me. Then headed home and came back in the following day.
Okay. Now, at this time, did you have a scheduled appointment, date and time to speak to the defendant?
I don't believe so. I think that's something that was still in the works.
Okay. And this is day 2, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So Wednesday the 28th, can you tell the jurors what happened?
We were finally able to get an appointment to meet with Mr. McIver at headquarters, and he arrived around 1:20 with Mr. Maples and a second attorney.
And can you tell the jurors, was there anyone else that was there with the defendant, Mr. Maples, and the second attorney?
There was a female there. I believe it was Annie Anderson.
Keep going.
Okay.
We'll pause if we need to.
Okay.
And King has things under control.
Okay. And so can you tell the jury what was the, so what happened when the defendant, Mr. Maples, the second attorney, which by the way, do you know his name?
Yes.
What's his name?
Calvin Leopold.
Say it again.
Calvin Leopold.
Do you know how to spell his last name for the jurors?
Leipold.
Okay. And Ms. Anderson.
That's correct.
So tell the jurors what happened.
Mr. Maples requested to speak to me and Detective Zimbrick.
Hold on 1 second. I don't want you to tell us what they said. Okay?
That's correct.
Harmon was on his edge.
Yes.
This is what I would like for you to tell the jurors. Could you describe?
I'll let him frame the question, but not from, this is what I'd like you to tell the jurors. I'd like you to tell them a few things too, but.
But he did shift gears to say, would you describe? So, but in general, you provide the answers.
Okay. Would you describe for the jurors what happened when the attorneys and the defendant and Ms. Anderson arrived?
Well, we brought everybody upstairs to our floor, which is the third floor. Like I said, we have multiple interview rooms. We also have multiple, we call them family rooms, where people can sit while they're waiting that aren't involved directly with what we're doing. We escorted everybody into a room. And at that point, Mr. Maples had indicated he wanted to have a conversation before we would talk to Mr. McIver.
Okay. And so, can you tell the jurors, did you have a conversation with Mr. Maples before you talked to Mr. McIver?
Yes, we did.
And can you tell the jury, where did that conversation take place?
In one of our interview rooms.
Okay. And can you tell the jury, at the time that this conversation took place, were you documenting it in any way?
Yes, it was video and audio recorded.
Okay. And can you tell the jury who else was present, if any, during this conversation with Mr. Maples?
Detective Zimbrick and Calvin Leopold.
Okay. Where was the defendant?
He was still in the family room.
Where was Ms. Annie Anderson?
Still in the family room.
How long did this conversation last with Mr. Maples?
Approximately 14 minutes.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, during that conversation with Mr. Maples, did you see him sit down in a chair and demonstrate anything to you?
Yes, he did.
And can you tell the jurors, what did he sit down in the chair and demonstrate to you?
He was trying to demonstrate how Mr. McIver was handling the weapon.
Okay. And I want to show you, this is State's Exhibit number 281A. Prior to your testimony here today, have you had the opportunity to review the video and the audio tape regarding this meeting and interview with the lawyers and the defendant?
Yes, I have.
And can you tell the jury what we see depicted here in State's 281A, did you actually see this with your own two eyes?
Yes, I did.
And can you tell the jury, what does it reflect to you?
This is our interview room. Mr. Maples is sitting in a chair. I'm actually to the left of him, or directly in front of him. And he's kind of doing a hands motion, trying to describe how Mr. McIver was handling the weapon based on the information he had.
Let me object to that. I don't know based on what information you have.
Okay, if you want to ask him about the information he had, you can do that when you're doing.
I get that. But the answer said it was information from a specific person. And I don't know whether, I think that's beyond the scope of the knowledge of the witness.
Okay, I thought what I heard was based on the information he had, not what the information was, but he demonstrated to me based on the information he had. If I misheard that, I'm happy to continue the discussion. If that was what was said, I don't see something objectionable to that, or I'll overrule whatever objection there might be to that. Mr. Rucker.
Yes. About how far away from Mr. Maples are you when he is demonstrating for you that?
2 feet at the most.
2 feet.
Yes.
And is there anything that's obstructing your view of this demonstration?
No, there's not.
Now, can you tell the jurors, at this time, as the lead investigator, were you interested in obtaining as much information as you could about how the gun went off?
Yes.
Now, after the 14 minutes meeting with Mr. Maples and Mr. Leopold, can you tell the jurors, did you get the opportunity to actually speak to Mr. McIver personally?
Yes, I did.
And can you just kind of characterize or describe for the jurors how that happened?
Mr. Maples left this interview room, returned about 2 minutes later with Mr. McIver, and we all introduced each other and sat down in chairs to begin the interview.
When Mr. Maples left the room Can you tell the jurors, was there anyone who remained in the room?
Detective Zimbrick and Calvin Leopold and myself.
Okay. And so did anyone from the Atlanta Police Department actually follow Mr. Maples as he went to go get Mr. McIver?
No.
And so how long did it take Mr. Maples to come back with Mr. McIver?
Approximately 2 minutes.
2 minutes. And so once they entered the room, we're still video and audio recording.
Yes.
And can you tell the jury, did the defendant have to speak to you?
No.
Did you threaten him or promise him anything in order to acquire a statement from him?
No, I did not.
If he didn't want to talk to you, what could he do?
That's order. That's order.
Okay.
I'll rephrase.
I'd ask it a different way.
Okay.
That is more.
Okay. Was he free to leave at any time?
Yes, he was.
Okay. And he had 2 lawyers there with him.
Yes, he did.
Now, can you tell the jury, during the interview with the defendant, did you ask the defendant any specific detailed questions about how the gun went off?
No, I did not.
How long did your interview with the defendant last?
26 minutes.
Did you, during the interview, ask the defendant to demonstrate with his hands and body how the gun was positioned at the time that it went off?
No, most of my questions were, could you explain what happened? Kind of open-ended.
And when you say to explain what happened, what do you mean?
I'm just, it's an open-ended question I'd prefer to ask. I mean, something, I don't know if it was those exact wording, just whatever you can remember, could you please tell me? I'd like to leave it open-ended to see what I get.
Okay. And is that part of the interview techniques that you were taught?
Yes.
Okay. Do the interview techniques that you're taught include following that up with some specific detailed questions to kind of narrow down some particular issues?
Yes, it does, but in that instance, based on the pre-meeting that we had, I didn't feel I had to...
And let me object to this. This is going to be an answer based upon hearsay.
It could be. So if you want to, it wasn't necessarily, but it was approaching an intersection that had as one direction that could be turned an area that we ought not to get into. If there's a hearsay.
Let's see if I can navigate.
Okay. You can
remain standing.
Okay, you can remain standing. I'll manage it now, not to preclude any objections, but I'll let
I
it
think
know.
the navigation is going to be that successful.
We'll see if he has GPS.
Let's see. You had a pre-meeting with whom before you spoke to Mr. McIver?
Mr. Maples.
Okay. And during that pre-meeting, did you have a conversation with Mr. Maples?
Yes, I did.
And did Mr. Maples tell you certain things?
Yes, he did.
Okay. And based on what Mr. Maples told you during the pre-meeting, did that affect what questions you did or did not ask to the defendant when you had a chance to personally speak to him?
Don't answer that yet.
Same objection. The only basis for the answer would be hearsay responses and the inference drawn from a conversation that in fact we have had some pretrial litigation over already.
Okay, I hear you on that. If the question is limited to, did your conversation with Mr. Maples influence the way you conducted your interview with Mr. McIver, I'll allow that. You can't get into specifics. Did you not ask question X because of your conversation with, I think that is problematic. So if you can preserve your objection, I'm letting you know the question that I'm allowing Mr. Rucker to ask.
I understand that ruling, but that leads to specific confrontation problems. It leads to specific Sixth Amendment problems. It leads to specific problems that I would have in dealing with that on cross-examination. And I want to explore that.
Okay. So why don't we take our morning break? Because I need to work through this. I know it's a little early, but we'll work through all that. So please, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to have you go back to the jury room. We'll try to get you back in here around 10:35 according to that clock, assuming you're ready at that time, and we'll have Deputy Kane check with you all. We don't have Deputy Murphy today. His little boys were in town, and he was hoping to spend some time with them. So he's doing that as a great opportunity for him, but we're in the able hands of Deputy Kane. So he'll take you back to the jury room. We'll get you back in here shortly.
All rise for the jury.
You may be seated. All right. Deputy Smith, you would head on outside for the break. We'll get you back in here when it's time to reconvene. Thank you. Mr. Harvey, share with me more of the concerns you've got so I can work through this.
Well, we have previously dealt with this issue. We dealt with this issue when Detective Zimber was on the stand, if you remember. And I was developing a line of questioning that asked him about his freedom to ask questions to Mr. McIver.
Yes, and we had a discussion where the state, outside the presence of the jury, suggested that the attorneys for Mr. McIver had somehow placed restrictions on what Zimber could ask. I was pointed to some text in the transcript of the exchange between attorneys and Smith and Zimber, and I concluded from that there were not restraints put. There was a reference, if I'm recalling correctly, by Mr. Maples that Mr. McIver might not recall things, but I did not find that there were any restraints placed on what they could ask. Right. So, agreeing with you, so what?
That's good so far. Now, this line of questioning says, okay, as a result of that conversation, he's going to be asked, did you believe that you were restricted in any way, or that you couldn't ask questions, or something else? I don't know how Mr. Rucker is going to particularly phrase that question, or how he already did. Then the answer from, I anticipate the only reason to ask the question is for Detective Smith to say, yeah, I thought that I...
Okay, I now very clearly understand your concern. I was seeing this going in a completely different way. We'll have Mr. Rucker explain what his perspective is, but I thought the purpose was to say, well, we basically had covered some things, and so we didn't, not that there were any restraints. Certainly, if that's the implication, intimation, anything like that,
that's what I think.
He may not go there. So let's have Mr. Rucker tell me what he was thinking. And I recognize that Mr. Rucker is hamstrung, and I don't mean that in a pejorative sense, but because of hearsay, he can't say, did Maples say X, Y, or Z, and so he's having to speak more generally. But where were you going with this?
Right. And Mr. Harvey is, his perspective goes way farther than I had intended to go. The truth of the matter is we've all seen the original transcript and the videotape, and so we know during the conversation with the lawyers before the defendant enters the room, they say to him, hey, I've talked to him, he doesn't remember this. He can't tell you how the gun went off. He can't tell you, what actually happened, so don't even go there. I think that's a specific quote. Don't even go there. I don't want you guys to get frustrated, like you shouldn't even touch this area. And so the detective is saying, hey, I wanted to talk to this guy for almost 3 days about how the gun went off, And then when I finally get a chance to talk to the guy, I don't ask him any questions about how the gun went off.
Well, I have a couple observations about that. One, that may well be the exact language. The way I took it from reading it as well as hearing it is not that it was a command, as in those are off limits. It was, I don't want you to waste your time, or, and he used the word, Maples did, get frustrated, think that my client is withholding anything. We've talked to him and he just doesn't remember. All said, this may be argued in closing, but a detective worth his salt is going to ask anyway, hey, what happened? How'd the gun go off? Unless, and I don't believe it's the case, it was, you may not talk to Mr. McIver unless you stay away from that question. And that is not how I take what Mr. Maples said. And so I think maybe on redirect, you might be able to explore that if Mr. Harvey pounds on Detective Smith. Like, you didn't even ask, what kind of thoroughness do you have here if you didn't even ask why the gun went off?
Right.
If Mr. Harvey doesn't do that, then we don't need to get into an area that has the potential to get real complicated in some ways that Mr. Harvey has flagged.
Yeah, I understand. And it wasn't that the detective was precluded from asking questions. My question to him was, did it influence your investigative technique or decision with respect to asking those very specific questions? But I do understand the court's ruling, which is why I only intended to go as far as that question. And anticipating that on cross-examination, a key focus area for Mr. Harvey will be all the things the detective didn't do.
Well, so I have two responses to that. One, if Mr. Harvey says you didn't do a GSR analysis on the back of the seat, you didn't call this witness and you didn't do that, well within his right to explore.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that implicates the thoroughness of the interview with Mr. McIver.
Okay.
So that's one. Number two, if Mr. Harvey zeroes in and critiques through his questions the way in which Detective Smith interviewed Mr. McIver, he should do so with some caution because that would cause me to reevaluate whether you ought to be able to talk with this witness about why he asked the questions he did. Currently, his answers to me make perfect sense, consistent with good interview techniques. Tell me what happened. And I would follow up based on an answer. And you've established that. Maybe we can move on from there. If there's an effort to attack the way that interview was conducted, then let's revisit it. I might come down differently, but for now,
I'll move on.
That's great. Mr. Harvey, anything you want to get clear before we leave this topic?
No, Judge. I do want to, the court is correct in its recollection of what it heard at our, I believe it was the sidebar at the time, and we particularly pointed out page 10 of the entire transcript. And with all due respect to Mr. Rucker, those were not the words that were used, but the import was the same. So nothing else to add, and I understand the court's ruling.
Okay, great. Then why don't you all take a quick break? Got to give the court reporter a break. We'll probably start lunch a little early today because we're not going until 5 or 6 anyway. But since the jury's breaking, you guys can break. We'll start as soon as we can get the legal room back.